Karina, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. I'd love to ask you, what first attracted you to work with Connex?
I was introduced to Connex, I think it was a colleague at work.
Okay.
And the way that it was introduced to me was, do you want to be in a room with people that may or may not be in your industry that are trying to do the same things that we're trying to do? And I said, say more. What does that mean? They do have a conference, but it's really about having access to professionals on your level and higher that really are leading healthcare organizations, primarily the revenue cycle side. And so that really was what interested me. That's how I became aware of it. I would explain it differently now.
Right. Yep.
A lot differently. But I have to say, the first time I went to a conference, the first time I was, I think the first time we interacted, I was actually at the first conference.
Okay.
For me, that was my first experience with Connex. And it was a very intimate group for me. It was so easy to be myself, to be open and honest about, what I knew, where I wanted to ask questions, and the environment was so open and welcoming. So for me, it wasn't so much about the professional aspect is there, right? Professional aspect is not what makes Connex for me different. I think it's the feeling. I think it's the people. I think it's a different experience for me. And also, I feel like other events are very heavily vendor driven, and at least in financial healthcare for sure. And Connex is not that for me. I think that this is one of the few spaces where revenue cycle leaders from across the country can come together and have a conversation, many conversations about what's happening in our world, which we feel is so unique, without being sold something at the end of the conversation.
Remember, that's so important. And you know what's interesting, you say that, because obviously we do work with vendors.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of our business. But we do it quite deliberately differently.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear your perspective on how that both feels for you, but also works for you.
Oh, I love that you asked this question, because this is literally what I talk to my friends and in the industry, and my colleagues in the industry. When I do speak to a vendor that I've been connected with through Connex, they know exactly what the need is. It's appropriate.
Okay.
It's an appropriate match. It's something that's relatable. My chief medical officer is also part of Connex. And oftentimes him and I will talk and say, did you get connected with someone for this? Because I was asking, so when we're in our own intimate medical center meetings and talking about development and talking about process improvement and talking about, for us, a lot of it is technology and how do we improve it. Him and I will talk, anyone in Connex, it's immediate, because we know if I call Andrew's my go-to person. If I call Andrew and I say, listen, Andrew, I'm looking for this, he will call me back with very specific quality vendors. And for me, it removes what I want to call noise, right? This is not appropriate. And he's very honest. He's very honest with me. He's like, I think this is more what you're looking for. What do you think? There's no pressure. There's no pressure. And I had the first conference I went, I took my son. He had recently graduated from college, and it was in Vegas, so I took him with me. And he thought the vendors were just other providers that were part of the conference. It's like a family in Connex rather than the very pressured sales opportunity. And that feeling is everything. It's very, very helpful to, I think, for our leadership to grow and to understand, what else is out there that we don't know, or we're not necessarily exposed to it because it's not popular in New Jersey. However, this other medical center in Atlanta that is actually here today, that I can speak to them today, knows this vendor very well and actually uses them for X amount of years. So that is really, really valuable for us. The fact that the providers, there's no need to say, can I get a reference? You don't need a reference list because John has used them. And John said, this is the feedback. Here are the pros, here are the cons, because like I said, we're in such a comfortable environment at Connex that we're able to speak freely. And that's very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you so much for that. I think the heart of what we try and do is foster good connections, right? And that's whether that we be with peers, whether that we with vendors, and whatever guys that is, or even to information, to insights about what's happening in other hospitals around the country. I'm curious what sort of the key value you get from Connex when you look and say, okay, well, how does it help you in your day-to-day, your strategic thinking, or things like that?
I think that my network has grown a lot through Connex, specifically through Connex. And I think that our community is very helpful. So I think that for me, the change pre-Connex and post-Connex is really the relationships that we built, and that it's not a relationship on this massive board where you send a question and maybe someone answers. I have them on my personal cell phone, and I'm going to call them and they're going to answer. And it's a peer that, like I said, lives in a different state, but understands, this is what we're going through. And I think that what happened in February with Change Healthcare being a huge clearinghouse where we all disconnected, that was our primary triage. What is everyone else doing? What are you guys, what's the plan? What are you guys thinking? I'm thinking this, and just that the diversity in thought, because we all have different type of hospitals that we service, or different type of medical centers, but also the truth is the solutions are usually a lot alike, right? At the end of the day, it's revenue cycle and it's healthcare, and something that works for you may work for me. So they are my go-to people. Usually it's my Connex list first. And I will tell you this, in the last year, anyone else who's made it to that list for me, I've connected them with Connex.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Because you know what, if you fit that personality, where you're a leader in revenue cycle and you want to help others and you want to always grow and be in the rooms where these conversations are being had, you need to be a part of Connex. You're going to love it. And that's what I tell people.
Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. One last question. Virtual sessions and things that we do, because that's, I think, an area that we've really tried to build and grow, because obviously an event's wonderful and great, but it does mean you have to fly, and not everyone can do that, and that has to line up with your date and all that stuff. And the other thing is you want to have a resource that you can call upon when things like Change Healthcare happen, or that kind of thing, when you just need to find out. How do you find what we do virtually to be useful to you?
Well, I refer to the topic, so I'm unable to catch them live a lot of the time.
Yep.
And I love that you guys post them, because then I can go back and I can see it. But I think that whenever I've had to reach out to anyone with like a follow-up, if there was any clarification, or are you new to the team? I haven't seen you. There's always a welcoming response, so that the connections are able to happen because we have this one thing in common, right? We value the connections in Connex. So there's no insecurities about reaching out to a peer, because you know that they're as committed as you are for these connections. So we're all here for the same purpose. I think that the content on the virtual sessions are really great. And they're really great. And if I can join, I'll join for a little bit and maybe catch the rest later. I think it's part of my continuous education and continuous growing within the industry.
Karina, thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.